looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition.
I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get.
Many across the country, of course, are disappointed, sad, even angry right now. Now, I understand those feelings.
The American people have loudly rejected the failed policies of the Biden-Harris-Schumer agenda.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. We start with breaking news on many fronts. President-elect Trump continues to build his incoming administration. Late this afternoon, he made a very surprising announcement, saying he intends to nominate Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz as his Attorney General. CBS News has also projected Republicans will retain their majority in the United States House of Representatives. We estimate that the GOP will win a minimum of 218 seats. This comes as President-elect Trump returned to the nation's capital today for two meetings. Trump's first stop, Capitol Hill, where he addressed House Republicans.
We won that, and we won it every way, all 7 swing states by a lot. And then Michigan was great, couldn't be better.
Also, Republican senators elected John Thune to be the next Senate Majority Leader via secret ballot. Thune takes over after Mitch McConnell's 17-year run in that position. Today, Speaker Mike Johnson won the GOP nomination to remain Speaker. An official vote on that will come in January when the new Congress is sworn in. Trump traveled from Capitol Hill to the White House and a meeting with the man who ousted him nearly 4 years ago, President Biden. The two sat down in the Oval Office for a ceremonial meeting, which, of course, then President Trump denied President-elect Biden back in 2020.
Politics is tough, and it's, in many cases, not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much.
I want to be joined by my colleagues now, Finn Gomez and Ed O'Keefe and Scott McFarland. Scott, with your indulgence, please stand by there on Capitol Hill. I want to talk to Finn and Ed for a moment, and we'll get to you in due course. Finn, I want to talk to you about this Matt Gaetz announcement. I was on the phone with someone very close to the president-elect, been in the Trump inner circle for many, many years. That person, utterly stunned by the Gaetz announcement, could not believe it. Wanted me to read it over the phone to this person twice, just so I could be sure.
Yeah.
Have you encountered a similar, if not astonishment, surprise?
Yes. In a word, yes. First with Pete Hegseth, of course, his pick for
Defense Secretary
for DOD, yes, and now but Matt Gaetz, the reaction that I've seen almost universally has been shock, stunned, silence, and then just some trying to rationalize like what it means politically and what the steps are. I did speak, Major, to a former senior DOJ official under the first Trump term who said that Matt Gaetz has no business running DOJ. Is he even a lawyer? But then said it's much better, and this is their words, much better a buffoon running DOJ than, let's say, Ken Paxton, who could be the next pick if let's say, this one.
Ken Paxton, the current Attorney General in the state of Texas.
Right, correct.
Ed O'Keefe, it was a busy day at the White House. It was a day where the president, the sitting president, extended a ritualistic courtesy and an important transitional note of cooperation to President-elect Trump. How did it all go down?
Well, first, to your question about the shock, there is some shock. But I talked to somebody again today who said, I think what's important to remember here is the president is trying to not only reward loyalists, but reward his base. He promised to be disruptive. He promised to make some big changes across the federal government. Matt Gaetz is the latest to embody that. Whether or not he ever gets confirmed, whether or not it's through a recess appointment, doesn't matter. He's trying to demonstrate to his base and to those closest to him that were with him all the way that he's trying to make good on these promises. 60 some odd days to go, however, until Inauguration Day. Let's see if this stands. Now, what transpired here today at the White House is in keeping with the tradition that presidents like to try to maintain as they pass power from one to the next. And today, President Biden afforded a courtesy to President Trump that President Trump didn't afford to then President-elect Biden 4 years ago when he was still disputing the results of the 2020 election. What today's meeting was about was essentially launching what the Biden administration and what Trump signaled would like to be a seamless transition, one that has the two sides talking over the course of the next several weeks leading up to Inauguration Day. What we're waiting to hear is when or if the Trump team signs the sort of formal and legal memoranda of understanding that's required to allow Trump transition leaders to go into the different departments and agencies and start figuring out what's been going on and what they might want to do instead. That hasn't happened yet, according to the White House. The Trump team has not signaled that they've done it yet, but there have been some that have publicly said that they want to do this. We know it was a meeting that lasted just under 2 hours, mostly in and around the Oval Office. Just the two of them, plus their chiefs of staff, Jeff Zients, the current chief of staff, Susie Wiles, the incoming chief. And it covered a host of domestic and congressional issues, plus national security, Ukraine and the Middle East especially. In an interview with the New York Post this afternoon, Trump confirmed they spoke about Ukraine. He asked Biden for his opinions on the Middle East. And as Trump said, he graciously shared them. So a good sign, at least to the public here in this country and around the world, that a peaceful and hopefully successfully seamless transition is underway, Major.
And Ed, I want to burrow down just a bit on what you mentioned about that memorandum of understanding, because as I understand it, and my recollection is that carries with it some ethical obligations, some sort of fair play obligations of the incoming administration to abide by. And if it's unsigned, it makes this much more difficult, does it not?
Yeah, there's the elements about the entity that sort of oversees it all, but also some individual ones when it comes to who can get into departments to start looking over the books and whatnot. So we'll see what kind of legal framework eventually defines this and to what extent Trump officials are allowed to go into these agencies. We've been hearing from rank and file and others at these departments who are anticipating those visits and wondering what will ultimately happen, but that happens every 4 years if the rule book is followed. So far, though, again, no sign that those agreements have been signed.
Finn, you heard Ed O'Keefe refer to the shock effect of this Gaetz announcement and the Trump base probably being enthusiastic about that. Do you think this is a long-term commitment from President-elect Trump to Matt Gaetz, or if this gets really dicey in the Senate? Senate Republicans asked immediately after the announcement were a little hesitant about this. Do you think he goes to the mattresses, to use a phrase, for Matt Gaetz?
I think what we saw today with the election of Senator Thune to that leadership position shows that there is an independence there that body does have, especially with the influence and the pushing that you may see from the White House and from the president-elect. I think if there is turbulence to land Matt Gaetz, it could be something where the president-elect could perhaps pull the escape hatch lever and maybe get someone else who might be less controversial and maybe more sure to get in and land that nomination. Details
to come. Finn Gomez, Ed O'Keefe at the White House, thank you very much. I want to go to Scott MacFarlane. As promised, Scott, a very busy day on Capitol Hill. That's putting it mildly. What have you heard in the last couple of hours as these shockwave announcements have rippled through the Capitol?
Oh, there's a reason they call them provocative picks, Major, because they do provoke quite a response. There's been this pattern of equivocating, somewhat muddled responses to the Gaetz choice by Senate Republicans. They've used the phrase interesting or not on my bingo card, but nothing demonstrative or declarative about how they're going to project forward the pathway for a Matt Gaetz confirmation. But John Thune, as he was chosen by secret ballot, closed-door election, the next Senate Republican leader, told reporters he is going to have a confirmation process, that the Senate's not going to surrender that power unilaterally. And a confirmation hearing for some of these nominees could be quite colorful. Before we explain the reaction from Democrats, let's hear more from John Thune on this historic day, the first time in 18 years Senate Republicans have picked a leader who's not Mitch McConnell.
And this Republican team is united. We are on one team. We are excited to reclaim the majority and to get to work with our colleagues in the House to enact President Trump's agenda. We have a mandate from the American people, a mandate not only to clean up the mess left by the Biden-Harris-Schumer agenda, but also to deliver on President Trump's priorities.
Now let's talk about the reaction from Democrats. A couple of them are pretty telling. I was with Chris Coons shortly after the announcement was made, relayed some of the information to Senator Coons, and he was insistent that this was a joke, that weren't being serious. We had to convince him by showing him some of the news articles. Senator Peter Welch of Vermont, who has championed his good relationships on both sides, says Donald Trump does get the benefit of the doubt on his nominees, but not a blank check. And Senator Welch told CBS News Trump is already testing the bounds this quickly.
Scott, any reaction to Tulsi Gabbard? Tulsi Gabbard, a former member of the House of Representatives, Democrat from Hawaii, raised a lot of eyebrows in 2017 when she met with Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And Russia and Iran were proxies backing Assad in that civil war. Do you think has there been any reaction on Capitol Hill to her announcement, or the announcement from President-elect Trump, rather, that he intends to nominate her as Director of National Intelligence?
I think there already is going to be some reservations expressed by Democrats on that. That's no surprise. But what's most telling, and perhaps fits the form more than anything, is President-elect Trump sandwiching that in between Marco Rubio and Matt Gaetz. Marco Rubio is going to steal a lot of attention in the U.S. Senate with bipartisan support from his colleagues with whom he has equity. Matt Gaetz is capturing attention for any number of reasons. So Tulsi Gabbard somehow sinks below the radar, either strategically or by happenstance in this sequence of events.
Scott, how about this Department of Government Efficiency? Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm going to guess House Republicans in particular are excited about the prospect of this.
Especially if they don't have to fund it. If this is something that comes free of charge, I think the Congress is going to be just fine with things they don't have to pay for. There were any number of Democrats, as you could have predicted, dunking on this, saying, how do you have an efficiency board with two different people running it? Put that aside for a moment. Republicans gave Elon Musk a standing ovation today when Trump appeared before the House Republican Conference. That should give you an indication of their thoughts on Elon Musk and how much they will champion whatever he does with this Department of Governmental streamlining.
Scott McFarland on Capitol Hill for us. Thank you very, very much.
We did not have a compelling enough economic vision. The Democratic Party should have one simple mission, and that is to address the economic hardships and struggles of many Americans.
That was Rana, Democratic congressman from California, on Face the Nation this past Sunday. He will join us next to discuss where Democrats and their presidential bid went astray. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Democratic Party is going through several processes right now, one of them determining how it should move forward and what went wrong. That's actually two things. After President-elect Trump's victory in the election and Republicans keeping control of the House, regaining it in the Senate. To discuss this and other matters, I want to bring in Rana, Democratic congressman, joins us from Capitol Hill. I want to congratulate you, Congressman, on winning re-election to the 17th Congressional District. First of all, Congressman, your reaction to announcements today that have been reverberating, I'm sure, on Capitol Hill. Matt Gaetz, Attorney General, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence.
Well, thank you on the congratulations, and I want to thank the people of the 17th District. Look, the people voted for Donald Trump to have lower prices and a secure border. I don't think they voted for the appointments that they're getting. I've worked as colleagues with both Tulsi Gabbard and Matt Gaetz, so I'll let the Senate make their determination. But it's a indication, including of Tom Harmon and also Stephen Miller, of just where this president's going to go. I mean, he is not moving to the center. He's going to his MAGA base. And we'll see if he's overreaching on the mandate that he had from the American people.
Speaking of that mandate, with your permission, Congressman, I want to read to you something that was published in USA Today, an op-ed from a longtime Democratic consultant named Chris Kofinas. He writes as follows: on every level, meaning the election, it was a historic defeat that has created a new block of voters who will affect every future election, the hidden Trump Democrat. These voters, I go on to quote directly, grew tired of being lectured at by a cadre of political, social, cultural, and establishment elites who minimized or outright ignored the serious economic pain they felt over inflation or the grave concerns they felt over illegal immigration. How much, if at all, do you agree with that sentiment?
I agree with the second half, that we have to acknowledge that for the past 50 years, people have been shafted in this country, that working class and middle class folks are struggling economically. Their kids may not be able to buy a house or a car. Jobs and factories have gone offshore, and an economic and political system has failed them. And we failed to articulate that, and so people didn't feel seen or heard. And then we can talk about what the solutions are. In terms of, are the Democrats permanently losing voters? I mean, this happens after every election. It's like in a football season. A team wins by 40 points, and suddenly they're going to the Super Bowl. Next game, they lose, and they're out of contention. So the pendulum swings back and forth in American politics. I'm not concerned about that. I am concerned about the Democrats developing a strong economic message and feeling people's pain. And I also think we need to be respectful and humble, even where we have opinions that we may disagree, not lecture people about our views.
How about this description, cadre of political, social, and cultural elites?
Well, look, I think we have a cadre of political operatives who are out of touch with ordinary communities, the people who thought that having Beyonce and Bruce Springsteen, I love Bruce Springsteen, and Katy Perry doing concerts was somehow more important than having people who had been laid off because of plant closures talking at political rallies. I mean, I don't understand what they thought they were doing with the events they organized. So I do think there needs to be a house cleaning of the political operative class. I think we need to listen more to people like Chris Deluzio and Marie Perez and folks like Jared Golden, even. I mean, some from all parts of the party, progressive, centrist, it doesn't matter, but they're connected to communities, actual communities, meeting actual voters. That's what I think we need.
You traveled to New Hampshire during the primaries. You went to Michigan, the Dearborn and Detroit areas. You have been this year, this election year, close to some of these fractured components of the Democratic coalition. Did election night genuinely surprise you, Congressman?
It didn't surprise me that much. The magnitude of the defeat surprised me. I have to give you credit, Garrett. When I was seeing all these polls up on Michigan, you were the one in your reporting saying, no, this thing is much closer than it appears, weeks before the pundits caught up. And that was certainly my experience going to Michigan. I mean, the war was a huge issue. The economy was a huge issue. People just weren't feeling that they were part of the middle class. They still felt that they were falling behind. And in New Hampshire, I think that there was a mistake in not campaigning there, and that probably resulted in the races being closer than people expected.
And what, if you were to synthesize it into a sentence, would you say is the most important priority for Democrats coming out of this election?
A real substantive vision on the economy that recognizes that while districts like mine are thriving, a lot of the country has fallen behind and isn't succeeding in a modern economy.
Ro Khanna, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's, I guess this is the word, trifecta. Republicans seal the deal and secure control of the House. CBS News polling expert Anthony Salvanto, there he is at the touchscreen, your friend and mine, standing by with some of the details. That's next. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. CBS News projects House Republicans will hold at least 218 seats, possibly more, but have a pretty narrow majority when the new Congress is convened. To explain how that happened, I want to bring in CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, your friend and mine, Anthony Salvanto. Break it down, Anthony.
How you doing, Major? So we think, you see the 218, that's a minimum. When you say maybe more, Republicans could end up around 221, maybe plus or minus one, maybe 220, maybe 222, something right around there. And there's a few House races still outstanding. But the way that this happened really came down a lot to California. We did make a projection in Arizona today. We zoom in really on Southern California. And when people ask, why does this take so long? I want to give people some context. California allows ballots to arrive up until yesterday. They vote by mail, so it takes a while to count. The story here, I'm going to tap on a couple of these, where you've got some of the races that were tight, Democrats were able to hold on down and around an area you and I know well as we head down towards Orange County, San Diego area. So Democrats held on a couple there, but Republicans tended to do well around the Central Valley. This race was projected today in the 41st, and there's another one that we are watching very closely up around the north part of Orange County for Michelle Steele here. So what the overall point here is not much has really changed from the last Congress to this one. So Republicans just edging over that 218 that they would need, Major.
And Anthony, would you say those California results reflected in part the larger percentage of the popular vote that President-elect Trump pulled out of California this time around?
You know, California, a lot of this has to do with how they draw their districts. California has more competitive districts, not just because of the geography that you see here, a lot of Democrats concentrated across in the coast, more Republicans in the Inland Empire and the Central Valley, but also because via a commission, you don't get as many heavily gerrymandered, heavily partisan districts. That's part of the story as well, Major.
Anywhere on that map, California or otherwise, where House Democrats did well?
Here and there, there's a couple outstanding. We're going to watch Iowa 1 from here. Not necessarily going to go Democratic, but it's still outstanding. The Ohio 9th is one. Oh, I hit Michigan instead of Ohio there, Major. But
I know how that happens.
You know, not that, you know. After enough time tapping this, you would think I would never miss tap, but there you go. Let's see if Marcy Kaptur hangs on here. So there's still a couple of outstanding. In terms of doing well, I would say the general pattern for Democrats is they hang on to the seat. They hang on to the seats they needed to hang on to. But Republicans, especially, as I said, across the Inland Empire there in California, also hang on to a lot of key seats for them. So no major sort of big shift in the overall House this time around, Major.
With the map and the breakdown, as always, Anthony Salvanto, thank you.
You got it.
Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy get set to run Trump's Department of Government Efficiency. A look at what we're learning about their roles, among other things. That's coming up on the show. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Very good to have you with us. We're following the breaking news. President-elect Trump selected Florida Congressman, longtime ally Matt Gaetz, to be his nominee as the next Attorney General of the United States. CBS News investigative producer Michael Kaplan is here. Now, Michael, I want to read to you something that the House Ethics Committee released in June 18th to be specific. It said it was continuing its probe into these matters, whether Representative Gaetz may have, and I'm quoting directly here, so listen carefully, engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, accepted improper gifts, dispensed special privileges and favors to individuals with whom he had a personal relationship, and sought to obstruct government investigations of his conduct. What's interesting about this release in June is it followed a preliminary investigation the Ethics Committee did into these matters, and after Gaetz's serial denials of any wrongdoing. Where do things stand?
Well, yeah, the Ethics Committee is still ostensibly doing this review. They said, you know, in that statement you read, they said that the allegations still merit further review. And as long as he is a member of Congress, that review can continue. But if he is confirmed
as Attorney General, it ends.
It ends, yes. And many of those allegations that you just listed off, it stems from a federal Department of Justice probe into Gaetz's wrongdoing, specifically alleging that there was this sex trafficking operation where Gaetz attended a drug-fueled and sex-fueled party, among other things, and allegedly had sex with an underage girl when she was underage. Now, he's denied all those allegations, as you mentioned. The Department of Justice probe was eventually dropped.
Meaning no charges were filed.
No charges were filed.
Against Gaetz.
Yes, but, you know, he routinely decries himself as a victim of government weaponization
of a justice inquiry.
And this is...
Was anyone related to that case in any way charged or implicated criminally?
Well, one of his associates, a former Seminole County, which is the county that Orlando...
Seminole County, Florida,
yes.
yes.
Seminole County, Florida tax collector, pled guilty to sex trafficking charges and is currently sitting in prison for that. And there's extensive reporting, including from CBS News, about Venmo transactions that occurred between Greenberg and women who...
Greenberg is the person you just mentioned.
Yes, the tax collector, and women who attended these parties. And multiple women have come forward to testify not only to the ethics committee, but as part of that now dropped DOJ probe. And a lot more detail will be scrutinized as Gaetz's nomination moves forward of a defamation case that played out this summer involving Greenberg and the gentleman whose house the party was thrown at. There are some pretty sordid details about sexual misconduct that have come out as part of that defamation hearing. And again, Gaetz has denied all this wrongdoing, but you can see why he may feel like he's a victim of DOJ and the so-called weaponization.
And some of this information may be, and in fact probably will be forwarded to the Senate Judiciary Committee as part of the confirmation review process. Michael Kaplan, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I want to bring in our panel, Meredith McGraw and Andrew Desiderio. Meredith is a national political correspondent for Politico. Andrew, senior congressional reporter for Punchbowl News. Punchbowl, for those of you who may not be aware, specializes in all matters Capitol Hill and does so quite well. So, the two of you, let's just go over the day's events, starting with Matt Gaetz. Meredith, your reaction.
This was a shocking pick by Donald Trump today. We'd seen how over the course of the past few days, he's been rolling out his cabinet appointments and he's been holding meetings down at Mar-a-Lago for some of his, biggest appointments, whether it's, the Secretary of State, which was announced today as officially as being Marco Rubio. A lot of the appointments so far, I hadn't heard too many grumblings from people in D.C. about them, but I will say today with the rollout of Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, and in particular with Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, it has really sent shockwaves on Capitol Hill. You were just outlining some of the ethics probes that Gaetz has been under. He is incredibly loyal to Donald Trump and will certainly shake things up in Washington the way that Trump would like. That's if he is able to get confirmed by the Senate. And I think that's one of the biggest questions here is if Gaetz or some of the people that he's put forward so far are even Senate confirmable.
Andrew, your thoughts on whether Gaetz is Senate confirmable based on the early read?
Yeah, it's the question of the day, question of the moment right now. It's looking uncertain at this point because you've got senators, even ones who are traditionally very deferential toward Donald Trump, are expressing pause or at least not full-throatedly supporting this nomination like they have with others. I will note that senators who sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, like Tom Tillis, for example, said pretty bluntly that it's going to be really difficult when it comes to the whip count to get Matt Gaetz confirmed. So we'll have to wait and see at this point. But I do think it's notable that these more controversial picks were rolled out just hours after Senate Republicans quite triumphantly voted for a new Senate Republican leader who's going to be the majority leader come next year, John Thune, the Republican, of course, from South Dakota, who's currently the #2 Senate Republican. He suddenly now has a lot on his plate, and his message coming out of that leadership election this morning was, I'm going to prioritize the confirmation of President Trump's nominees. Now, up until that point, we had heard about folks like Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz being named as National Security Advisor. Of course, that's not a Senate confirmable position, but something that national security hawks in the Senate were very pleased by. So up until that point, you heard Republicans very, honestly, quite happy with some of the nominees and some of the picks that Donald Trump has put forward so far. And then, of course, in the hours after that leadership election, Trump kind of sprung all of this on them. And they are in a state of shock right now. And some Senate Republicans I'm talking to have said have said privately, of course, that they are planning to talk to Donald Trump about this and try to sort of talk him off the ledge.
Meredith, About Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk and this Department of Government Efficiency, what are you hearing and what are your expectations?
Well, this is an idea that Donald Trump has been talking about with Elon Musk for a while now, both publicly and privately. And over the past week since Donald Trump was elected, Elon Musk has really been at his side down at Mar-a-Lago. He traveled with him to Washington today and has really become a kind of top consigliere for Trump. Same with Vivek Ramaswamy, who's been down in Palm Beach as well. And their idea for this is to basically crowdsource how they might be able to cut government inefficiencies. And they said that they're going to be taking recommendations from people, and then it will exist as sort of a panel where they can put forward recommendations. But I will note, even though Elon Musk has talked about potentially cutting $2 trillion from the budget, which is an incredible amount of money considering what the government budget actually is, and Vivek Ramaswamy has talked about gutting parts of the federal government. Ultimately, the purse strings belong to Congress. And so my understanding, at least from the sketchy details that it seems like we're learning about now, is that they will put forward some recommendations of ways and places where they can cut some waste.
And Andrew, you know this, Meredith knows this. I'll just let the audience be reminded of it. 2/3, if not more, of the federal government's budget flows through the following: entitlements, defense, and payments of interest on the national debt. There's not much left for Elon and Vivek to pick over.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And this was actually a topic of discussion during a closed-door candidate forum that Senate Republicans had last night with the candidates for the leadership, which, of course, were John Thune, John Cornyn, and Rick Scott. And as I mentioned earlier, John Thune ended up winning that race and will be the Senate Majority Leader next year. But during that conversation, the three candidates were pressed specifically on this point, on finding ways to cut government spending, finding ways to use what's called the budget reconciliation process next year, whereby you only need a simple majority in the Senate to achieve that, right? And at the same time, they're talking about spending additional dollars on things like border security, on building a border wall, which is what Donald Trump has for years sort of campaigned on. And so at the same time as they're talking about cutting government spending, and there's not much to choose from there in terms of the non-mandatory side, or the discretionary side, as we call it, at the same time, they're looking to hike spending in certain areas when it comes to specifically the border and the construction of a border wall.
Meredith McGraw and Andrew Desiderio, thank you very much for your time. We're following breaking news. I told you there was plenty of it today. Out of Pennsylvania, where the U.S. Senate race is heading toward a legally mandated statewide recount. Incumbent Democratic Senator Bob Casey, Republican Dave McCormick are within the margin there to trigger a mandatory recount. That is under Pennsylvania law. Casey currently trails McCormick by about 27,000 votes. Counties must complete the recount by November 26. CBS News currently characterizes this race as lean Republican. President-elect Trump's foreign policy picks are rolling in. Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, Fox News host and combat veteran Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary will take a look at Trump's potential team and what it tells us about his foreign policy agenda. That's next. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. President-elect Trump has already named several people for key positions in his new and still developing administration. This, of course, has generated a surge in speculation about what these selections do or don't mean for a second-term foreign policy agenda. Robbie Agrawal is joining us now to make sense of it. He is the editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine. I'm a subscriber. Sir, it's great to have you with us.
My pleasure.
Robbie, what's your sense so far of the names mentioned or identified by the Trump transition team in the national security foreign policy space?
So identified is a good word because there's some disagreement about whether they've been confirmed or not. They are all loyalists. If you look at the key positions that have emerged, there is Elise Stefanik, potentially the UN ambassador, Mike Walls, from Florida, who would be the national security advisor. As you know, NSA has become a very powerful figure in U.S. foreign policy, partly because of just proximity to the president's office. Defense Secretary, we've learned that it is a Fox News anchor named Pete Hegseth. He, of course, has served in the military. All of these figures, what they have in common is they've been very clear about their loyalty to President Trump on many issues that others have diverged, whether it is January 6th and the insurrection or the fealty to the America First ideology. These three have not wavered.
Right, they have been in lockstep. A broad question for you, Robbie, if you please. How does the rest of the world view this momentous political event in America? With fear or with anticipation?
A bit of both. If you are in Europe, then you are scared. If you are part of the old world that relied on alliances, that relied on the post-Bretton Woods international order, the rules-based order, if you are from the world that likes the fact that the head of the IMF is always European and the head of the World Bank is always American, then you're very worried because Donald Trump is not going to care that much about alliances. He cares a lot more about bilateral relations. He sees, especially economics, in terms of what am I getting out of it? He is more bilateral than multilateral.
And transactional in a way that steps around or openly disdains multilateral institutions.
Exactly. He is not just transactional. At some level, all of us transact.
Of course.
He is nakedly transactional. And here's the other side of the equation. There are many countries around the world that are not scared of a transactional American president. In fact, that is what they want. So if you are, for example, Kenya or India or Indonesia or South Africa or Nigeria, you might look at that and say, actually, I want more transaction. I don't want an American president who's going to lecture us about democracy promotion or human rights and is going to challenge us on those fronts. We want to do deals, so bring on the deals. So it is a mixed picture. I think we tend to sort of reflexively imagine that every country on earth is looking at a Trump presidency and is worried about it. It actually opens up opportunities for many countries.
It has been observed already, Robbie, that with Mike Huckabee named ambassador to Israel, Elise Stefanik to UN, that President-elect Trump is already clearly demonstrating that his will be a pro-Israel, but also pro-Netanyahu American government. How does that simplify or complicate things in the Middle East?
Well, in some senses, look, Biden was also very pro-Israel in many respects. So you may not see much divergence on that front. In terms of trend lines, Trump is more pro-Israel. I don't think he cares as much about human rights. So, you know, whether the casualty toll in Gaza or Lebanon is something that he's going to shed a tear over.
Well, what about annexing Gaza or expanding settlements in the West Bank?
Very possible. I mean, Mike Huckabee has been quite open on that front about not really caring about those areas, using the old sort of Israeli terms for them, Judea and Samaria, instead of the West Bank. So those things, I think, would be immediately worrying signals for Arab countries, less so for Israel, of course. But Iran is an area that could be very interesting to see what happens. You know, among some of the names who've been mooted as potential national security officials in a Trump administration, there's a wide range of people who go from thinking, you know, in the America First tradition of not wanting to be embroiled in foreign conflicts, but you have all the way to the other end of the spectrum people who actually are arguing that, you know, the United States should help Israel go all the way now and attack Iran's nuclear facilities. So there's a big divergence in optionality.
Settle many of the remaining unsettled scores in the region,
Absolutely.
if they can. Robbie Agrawal, Foreign Policy, it's great to have you. I hope you'll come back because this conversation will not end here and now. Thanks so very much. From the state capitol in Sacramento to the halls of power right here in Washington, D.C., Governor Gavin Newsom of California goes to work on what he says is defending his state from what's coming from President-elect Trump. The steps he's taking on that front next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Some Democratic governors are preparing to push back against the incoming Trump administration. California Governor Gavin Newsom has called a special session of the legislature to, quote, Trump-proof the state. He also met with President Biden, lobbying the administration for funding and federal waivers before Inauguration Day.
Talking about everything we need to do to prepare for this transition, to prepare California, protecting our environmental leadership in California, issues related to health care, disaster recovery, disaster relief, FEMA funding. It's a great day for us.
CBS News California investigative correspondent Julie Watts is following the story and joins us now. Julie, as always, great to see you. California's Attorney General, as you know, Rob Bonta, says his office is already writing legal briefs in preparation to sue the incoming Trump administration. Catch us up on the state's history in regards to suing the first Trump administration.
Yeah, we have a long history, Major. During the first Trump administration, Governor Newsom and then Attorney General Javier Becerra sued the federal government on average once every 12 days. They filed more than 120 lawsuits on issues ranging from the environment to immigration. And notably, Becerra won most of those lawsuits, at least the lawsuits that actually went through the legal process by the time Trump left office. It's also interesting, you may remember, that really increased Becerra's national profile. He was then tapped by President Biden to go be Health and Human Services Secretary during the pandemic. Governor Newsom appointed his replacement, our now Attorney General Rob Bonta. And here's what else is interesting this time around, as they prepare to file what amounts to many lawsuits, at least that's what they're talking about. Both Newsom and Bonta are expected to run for office of their own over the next few years. Bonta's widely expected to run to replace Governor Newsom when he terms out in 2 years. And Newsom, of course, is widely expected to run to replace President Trump in 4 years. So it will be interesting to watch the political implications of California's legal battle here.
So what about this special session the governor has called? What is its agenda?
So the governor made an official proclamation. In it, he says he's going to ask lawmakers inside this building for additional funding to fund the California DOJ, that's the Attorney General's office, to fund other state agencies, and then his own executive branch. And he's talking about funding in this proclamation both for lawsuits against the Trump administration and then to defend against lawsuits by the Trump administration.
So Vice President Harris carried California, but by a margin far smaller than President Biden did. What is the political takeaway in California about that? And what, if anything, does it say about Californians' appetites for these kind of lawsuits?
You know, that's a really great question, Major, and that's something that we're going to be watching. Trump was able to flip at least 8 counties at last count. Of course, we still are counting some votes. Looks like 31 counties out of 58 at last count went for President-elect Trump. So it really, we are seeing a shift. In fact, even Governor Newsom recently in September said that he was wondering what state he was living in, and that was in response to sort of overwhelming support from Californians for a tough-on-crime ballot measure that would increase penalties for drug and theft crimes. Now, here's what's interesting about that, just in terms of the divide between the governor and the AG and sort of public sentiment in California. Both the governor and the AG opposed what is now known as Prop 36. In fact, most of the Democratic leadership inside this building publicly opposed Prop 36. The governor spent nearly a year, trying to keep it off the ballot. He was unsuccessful, and then California voters passed it at last count at about 70% support. So certainly they are at odds, at least when it comes to crime, with the desires of the governor and the AG and some of Democratic leadership. But what we're looking at here is not lawsuits related to necessarily homelessness and retail theft and drugs, right? The governor in his proclamation is talking about reproductive rights, about clean vehicle policies, about DACA, about immigration. And we don't have a lot of great polling on many of these issues because it frankly just was not top of mind for a lot of Californians heading into the election.
Julie Watts in Sacramento, thank you so very much. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report, that starts right now.